Good afternoon. Happy Easter. Welcome to our second session in our webinar series, The Call of the Catechist. So my name is Mark Shea Lawrence. I'm the Director for the Office for Evangelization and Catechesis here at the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops, and I'm very happy to welcome you to our session. Our keynote speaker today is Sister Janet Schaeffler, OP, and of course we have our colleagues David Daler facilitating for us the questions, and Dr. Ann Walsh, who is accompanying us as well through our session. And of course, Brandon Tran, who is behind the scenes looking after all things technological. If you have a question, you can put for Brandon, you can put that in the Q&A as well in case you're having difficulty, okay? So let us begin our session today with a little prayer for Easter. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. My Lord Jesus, you have risen in new life. Give us new eyes with which to recognize your presence in the world around us. Sharpen our vision so that we see beyond the ordinary events of each day and into the extraordinary reality of your grace. Brighten our view of the world with renewed hope in the coming of your kingdom. Soften our gaze so that we view others with the kind tenderness and compassion you showed so many. May each day of this Easter season provide glimpses of your glory. In your name we pray. Amen. That was a prayer that was composed by the Irish Redemptorists, and Dr. Walsh shared that with us earlier today. Thank you very much. So we'll just move to the next slide. I wanted to just do some follow-up from last week's session, or 2 weeks ago when we met with Sherry Weddell. Some of you were asking for follow-up with regard to how you might contact her or find out more about her programs, Called and Gifted and so on, and the parish programs on discipleship. So the Catherine of Siena Institute, you can reach it at siena.org, or you can contact Sherry directly at Sherry Ann Weddell, Sherry at siena.org. She's the co-founder and executive director, as she pointed out. So, and her book, of course, is available through Joseph's in Toronto, and you can find that online. Her book, Forming Intentional Disciples. It's available for purchase in Canada from Joseph's Inspirational. So I encourage you to go there. The CCCB does not have any kind of publishing or connection to the Siena Institute in that regard. So you would go over to the Siena Institute for any other information that you may wish to gather on the discernment of charisms. All right, without further ado, Sister Janet Schaeffler, OP, continues the ministry she was involved in for many years in parishes and as Director of Adult Faith Formation for the Archdiocese of Detroit, as she leads days of reflection, retreats, parish missions, and workshops and presentations. She facilitates gatherings and retreats for communities of religious women, as well as facilitating online courses for the University of Dayton and Boston College. She serves as she serves on the Pastoral Services team member for Renew International. Sister Janet created and publishes GEMS, a twice-monthly newsletter from an ongoing international best practices study on adult faith formation. She's the author of hundreds of articles and several publications, and some of her most recent books are Let This Be the Time, Spiritual Essentials for Life's Second Act, The Catechist Guide to Catholic Prayers, The Spirituality of the Catechist, and Activities for What Makes Us Catholic. She is one of the 4-member team who wrote the Leader's Guide to accompany the U.S. Bishop's Pastoral Plan for the Adult Faith Formation, Our Hearts Were Burning Within Us. She's been elected officer of the Executive Committee of the NCCL, the National Conference for Catechetical Leadership. In April 2010, Sister Janet received the Distinguished Service Award in Catechetics from the NCCL. She's been named one of the people who have made a significant contribution to the field of Christian religious education in the North American context by the Christian Educators of the 20th Century Project, Talbot School of Theology, Biola University, La Mirada, California. I first met Sister Janet first through her book, The Spirituality of the Catechist, and then in Sydney, Nova Scotia, a number of years ago when we had a wonderful catechetical conference, and she facilitated the reflection for the weekend there. And I was very, learned a lot and was very taken by her presentations and her knowledge and her encouragement of catechists. So without further ado, I welcome Sister Janet Schaeffler.
Thank you, Mark. And it's great to be here with everyone. And I would just like to thank people for being here. You know, this presentation, as the other ones really in this series, really aren't telling you how to teach. They're more about you. Of course, the more we pay attention to our own spirituality, that certainly does influence our teaching and our ministering with young people and their families. So let me get the PowerPoint up. And as Mark said, I will, the PowerPoint will be available after the 18th. Okay. So when you hear the word spirituality, just take a second. What comes to your mind? My experience is that when we talk about or read about spirituality, a lot of times we come across some very long and complicated definitions. There's also some much shorter ones. Years ago, I came across one that helped me to reflect on spirituality in a concrete way. And that definition said spirituality is who we are and what we do because of what we believe. And so that reminds me that spirituality is about all of life, what we do, who we are all the time, not just the prayer part of our lives, even though that is extremely crucial. The more I've thought about this definition, I've added another element to it, because I think something has to happen before we believe. So spirituality is who we are, what we do, because of what we believe, because of what we've experienced. We have to experience God. And I think everybody does. It's just that some people aren't always aware of it. And as catechists, I think that's one of our roles, is to help people recognize the God experience in their lives. But talking about us, we have to, first of all, experience God's love. All Christian spirituality is based on our experience, not just our knowledge, but our experience of God's love for us. So just think about the last couple of weeks. When was the time you experienced God? When did you experience God's lavish love? God's gentle care? When have you wondered at and experienced God's creativity? When have you appreciated God's unconditional acceptance? When have you been nudged by God's disquieting challenge? People often talk about differences in spirituality because of who they are. So for instance, we could say there's a married spirituality, a spirituality for lay people, a spirituality for single people, a spirituality in the workplace, and probably lots of others. throughout the centuries, we've had various expressions of spirituality flowing from some of our saints and religious orders. So for instance, Dominicans, Jesuits, Benedictines, Franciscans, to name just a few. There's lots of others. We also recognize that there's distinctive spiritualities within various cultures. So there might be, or there is, a Hispanic spirituality, a Native American spirituality, Hispanic spirituality. And then I think we're aware too that there's diverse spiritualities in various groups or movements within today's church. So for instance, Cursillo spirituality, charismatic spirituality. Realizing that each of these spiritualities is unique doesn't mean that they're contradictory, because they all arise from the same heritage of Christianity. They all have the same goal, which is to live and love as Jesus did. The difference is a matter of emphasis. Within the various spiritualities, each focuses on a specific, sometimes probably different element of how we live discipleship. And as we look at the spiritualities flowing, again, from the saints and religious orders, we find initials after the names of women and men who belong to religious orders. So for instance, Dominicans have OP, which means Order of Preachers. That's what Dominic founded the order to do. SJ is for Jesuits, Society of Jesus. Benedictines have OSB, Order of Saint Benedict, and lots more. So the spirituality of their founder and the community has formed these people. In reality, each of you, I think, has spirituality initials too. They tell about what forms you, what influences who you are. So you might be an HFC, a husband, a father, a caregiver, and those roles form you. You might be an ADT, an aunt, a dreamer, a teacher. Or your initials might be PGC, protector, grandparent, catechist. So what are your spirituality initials at this point in your life? So to determine them, you want to think about the people and experiences that have formed you throughout life. What roles in your life at this present time impact who you are? What has helped you realize that there's more to life than meets the eye? Who or what has helped you to experience God in your life? So flowing from those realities that we went over quickly, the various expressions of spirituality in our tradition, as well as in our own experience, I think we can ask, is there a unique spirituality for catechists? Because our ministry as catechists influences who we are and what we do, while at the same time, being a catechist, hopefully, helps us to grow in spirituality, probably in ways that we might never experience if we weren't catechists. So what I'd like to do in this little bit of time is to look at some characteristics of spirituality in general, and then we'll look at some that might be true of the spirituality of the catechist. And these are only some. We could come up with lots of others, but these are some that I think influence us. So some characteristics of spirituality in general. Spirituality is communal. Jesus' whole life was about community. He didn't do things alone. He gathered apostles. He ate with all kinds of people. He taught the Our Father, which is a community prayer. There's no I, me, my in that prayer. It's all about we and our. Jesus sent the apostles forth to be with other people, to wash feet, to bring good news. Even before Jesus' example, from the very beginning of creation, God formed us and called us to community. All of creation is interdependent. It's woven together from mutual interconnections. There are some belief systems that accentuate a me and God spirituality. That is not true for Catholic Christians. An individual Christian is an oxymoron. A challenging characteristic of who we are as Christian Catholics is that we are not called by God as individuals. We don't go to God alone. We go to God as a community, or we don't go. When he was about 6, my niece asked her son, "Why do you think God made humans?" And Owen said immediately, "So that we could name the animals." And Michelle said, "That's right. I wonder if there's anything else." And immediately he said, "Oh yes, it's all about relationships." So community and relationships with God, with one another, with all creation is a hallmark of Christian spirituality. A second characteristic is that our spirituality as Catholics, Christians, is Christ-centered. We know God because of Jesus. A lot of times people will say, Jesus is the answer, to which we might ask, well, what's the question? And the question might be different for each one of us. And yet this answer and all the possible questions point to the centrality of Jesus for who we are and whose we are. We realize that our spirituality, no matter what our initials might be, is an encounter with the person of Jesus. Another characteristic of spirituality is seeing the sacred in the ordinary. At times, do we picture God as up there, as an absentee landlord who once in a while comes to us? A Christian spirituality sees God's presence in another way. God did not set the universe in motion, retiring to heaven to watch it unfold. Instead, God is with us in our everyday lives of struggles and joys, questions and hopes, work and play, questions and gratitude, relationships and intimacy. And our poets have reminded us of that. Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote that earth is crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. And Gerard Manley Hopkins said, the world is charged with the grandeur of God. So spirituality impels us to see God everywhere. We don't have compartmentalized lives. Everything is sacred because God permeates everything. Our Catholic tradition has always affirmed this in what we call, as Catholics, the principle of sacramentality. The reality that God is present to us and we respond to God through the ordinary and everydayness of our lives. So do we become enthralled with ordinary things? The texture and colors of leaves, a smile from a stranger, somebody who asks you how you're doing, the peaceful darkness of nighttime, listening to a 3-year-old. The writer Chesterton said, "You say grace before meals. All right, but I say grace before the concert and the opera, and grace before the play and pantomime, and grace before I open a book, and grace before sketching, painting, swimming, fencing, boxing, walking, playing, dancing, and grace before I dip the pen in the ink." Everything is sacred. And that's how we meet God. Fourth characteristic, I think, flows from that principle of sacramentality, is seeing with God's eyes. There's an anonymous saying that reminds us how we strive to live when we see with God's eyes. It says, "May I gaze at each person with a look that says, I know so much good about you." Once I was going for a walk with my great nephew, Tyler. And as we were walking along, all of a sudden he stopped and bent down and happily said, "Oh, my favorite bug, can I pet him?" For Tyler, everything about creation was precious. Do we see, as Tyler did, with God's eyes, seeing the beauty of God everywhere and always, even in the smallest of things, the simplest of happenings? Do we see everyone and everything imbued with exceptionality? What would happen if we cultivated an attitude of responding to everyone and everything with Tyler's words? "Oh, my favorite." Another characteristic of spirituality is to be a people of hope. We read in the classic, "These are the best of times and the worst of times. It was the season of light. It was a season of darkness. It was the spring of hope and the winter of despair." Those opening lines of A Tale of Two Cities could be, I think, the modern retelling of Ecclesiastes, where we read, "There is an appointed time for everything, and a time for every purpose under the heavens, a time to weep and a time to laugh. And in all of these times, the best of times, the worst of times, the time to weep, the time to laugh, we're called to be a people of hope." Hope-filled people experience as many frustrations and disappointments as anybody else. They're just better equipped to withstand them and then hang on for the long haul. We hope because of the promises we've been given. We hope because we've experienced God. Father Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said, "The future belongs to those who give the next generation reason for hope." What a privilege, what a challenge for us as disciples, for us as catechists, to be people of hope. Another characteristic of, I think, our Catholic spirituality is to respond compassionately. And in a way, the virtue of hope brings us to this trait, because hope compels us to take responsibility for the future. Many times when we think about and talk about spirituality, we put a word before spirituality. We talk about my spirituality. We can become proud of our spirituality, the ways we've chosen to pray, to follow mentors who've lived holy lives. And yet, everything in the Catholic tradition stresses the importance of a life with others. The challenge of Jesus is not just to be a good person, but to live and act so that our lives touch everyone, touch the needs of today, and work for the good of humanity. Spirituality is not just between me and God, as we said a few minutes ago in talking about communal spirituality. From the Old Testament prophets, the test of faith was not how we feel about God, but our response to the question, how are the poor doing in my area? Have you ever prayed with scripture in one hand and the newspaper, or today your phone in the other? Would that call us to do something right here and right now? It's a breathtaking reality that often those who are hurting most somehow know and find strength to reach out to others in compassion. A few minutes ago, I mentioned my great nephew, Tyler, who saw his favorite bug. Tyler died suddenly when he was 6. My niece and her husband and my sister and brother-in-law, Tyler's grandparents, amid their heart-wrenching grief, took time and continued to do it, took time for others, walking with others who experience the death of a child. They also became involved in several groups and endeavors that responded to the suffering of others, especially material poverty. They just knew that their grief needed them to reach out, to respond compassionately to other people. So these are some characteristics of a Catholic Christian spirituality. They're also the basis for a spirituality for us as catechists. So let's look now at a few others, which they're certainly relevant to all Catholic Christians, but maybe in a unique way, they also strengthen the spirituality of us who are catechists. So spirituality for catechists, for everyone, is Eucharistic centered. It's centered in the Eucharist because of what Eucharist is about. Eucharist is about the reality that in receiving the body of Christ, we become the body of Christ. When we talk about the body of Christ, we're speaking about 2 mysteries: Jesus' presence in the bread and wine, and Jesus' presence in us, we who are the body of Christ. In the early church, when the priest gave communion, saying the body of Christ, the response was not amen, as we prayerfully respond now, but the response was, I am. You, I, we are the body of Christ. Centuries ago, when St. Augustine celebrated the Mass, he would hold up the host and say, receive who you are. Become who you receive. We are the body of Christ. Often we hear the cliche, you are what you eat, and probably imagine that it was coined by a weight loss clinic. And yet it was first said by Pope Leo the Great, and he was talking about receiving communion. In receiving the body and blood of Christ, we choose to become the body of Christ. So if Eucharist makes us the body of Christ, there's a challenge for us in that. And we as catechists live that challenge in all that we do, in our daily lives and in our catechetical ministry. We act like the body of Christ. We act like bread, that nourishes others. We act like wine that's poured out for others. When we say amen, we're not saying it only for the gift of Jesus' presence in the Eucharist. We're certainly saying it for that, but it's also more than that. It's intentional that the priest or Eucharistic minister says the body of Christ, the blood of Christ, and not this is the body of Christ or this is the blood of Christ. Because in that sacred exchange, our amen means that we believe, yes, that the bread and wine are the body of Christ. And also we believe that we are the body of Christ, broken and poured out for others. And that all of us gathered in this liturgy and those beyond our doors are also the body of Christ. So as catechists, we give our lives for others in nourishment. When we listen to a child's endless questions, when we share good news with a young person who's sharing, when we remember and are concerned about what's happening in the lives of our learners and their families. Our Eucharistic-centered spirituality impels us to do exactly what Jesus did, to be broken and poured out in nourishment, to be a servant of others. Jesus did two things at the Last Supper. He blessed the bread and wine, and he washed the feet of the disciples. Eucharist never ends with the act of receiving communion. We live Eucharist when we wash feet in our 24/7 world. There's a church in my neighborhood that has one driveway, which you enter and then go around the buildings and then come out on the same road. At the entrance, there's a sign that says, "Enter to worship." And as people drive out, there's a sign that says, "Exit to serve." One of my great nieces has a t-shirt that says, "Whatever happens in church doesn't stay in church." In the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the Church tells us that Eucharist is primarily an action of Christ, who gathers the whole community into full, conscious, and active participation, so that we can go out and be witnesses in the world. Especially for us as catechists, because we've celebrated Eucharist, we are the presence of Jesus in our world. We wash feet. We nourish others in the beliefs we share and with the gospel values that we live. So another characteristic of spirituality for catechists is that we live, hopefully, a spirituality of hospitality. In his August 2012 letter to the Catechist of Buenos Aires, then Cardinal Bergoglio, now Pope Francis, said, this was his message to the catechists: "Thank you for your quiet, faithful work each week, for your ability to be good Samaritans who offer hospitality out of faith by being familiar faces and dear hearts." The Church, each parish, each diocese, archdiocese, is called to be welcoming and hospitable. Catechists, I think, have a unique opportunity and challenge to be the symbol and reality of welcome and hospitality to so many today. A lot of times in our world today, when we hear the word hospitality, our thoughts immediately go to refreshments. That's certainly an important part of hospitality. But the spirit of welcome goes far beyond that. Hospitality is a characteristic of our spirituality when it's evident in our smile, when people experience it in our attitude of joy, when we're hospitable, when we delight in the gifts and presence of God in each and every person. We're hospitable when we have the desire and commitment to listen. Hospitality is evident in the ways we convey to people, our learners, their families, everyone we come in contact with, that they are worthwhile. Hospitality is evident in us as catechists, in our words that are encouraging, in our actions that are supportive, and in our spirit, which is compassionate. Another characteristic of spirituality, which is, I think, unique and needed for us, is the characteristic of kindness. Henry James, a novelist, said, 3 things in human life are important. The first is to be kind. The second is to be kind. And the third is to be kind. Near the end of his life, Rabbi Abraham Heschel said, when I was young, I used to admire intelligent people. As I grow older, I admire kind people. Scripture tells us, put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Of course, all people are called to kindness. That should be a trait of everyone's spirituality. I think for catechists, it's embedded in our spirituality. You first responded to the call of catechist in kindness, having a desire to give what you've been given. And as catechists, I think we live kindness in all that we do, in all the ways we relate to other people. Centuries ago, Plato said, be kind, for everyone you know, everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. Oftentimes we don't know what people are going through, but probably everybody that we meet needs kindness from others. And we as catechists are called to do that in all kinds of ways. So we might not always know the struggles, the discouragements, the disappointments, and the losses of those to whom we minister and their families, or our fellow catechists or other people in our parish. Yet the way we live our lives and the manner of kindness can touch the days of each of those people and can model for them the kindness so that they know what God's kindness is like. Another characteristic that I'll mention in a minute is, first of all, one of my favorite books to read with my nieces and nephews, and now my great nieces and great nephews, is the book Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. When Tyler, my great nephew, was about 3 and 4, he wouldn't let me read it to him. He would emphatically respond when I'd say, how about if we read this book? And I'd tell him the title. And he would emphatically say, it's not a bad day. It's a very good day. Look at all the great things we can have and do. He was filled with joy. And so joy is another characteristic of our spirituality as catechists. When someone asked St. John the 23rd why he called the Second Vatican Council, he immediately responded and said that he called the council to make the human sojourn a little less sad. Pope John realized that for most people, maybe all people, their lives contain worries and the strains of everyday life. And he was saying it's one of the roles of the church to accompany people on this journey, enabling the journey of life to be a little lighter, a little more joyful. And we as catechists who are called by the church, commissioned by the church, have a unique way of doing that, of accompanying others so that their journey is a little bit more joyful. The word joy appears in Scripture more than 315 times. So what a gift we have, but what a challenge we've been given. The ancient Egyptians believed that when they died, they would be asked 2 questions, and their answers would determine whether they continued their journey in the afterlife. The 2 questions were, did you find joy? And did you bring joy? Those are wonderful questions for us as catechists. After each session, what if we asked ourselves those questions? St. Francis of Assisi said, our job is to lift up people's hearts and give them reasons for spiritual joy. As young people or adults leave our catechetical sessions, do they leave with spiritual joy? Another characteristic that I think is unique, important, needed for the spirituality of catechists is gratitude. To be a to be a saint is to be motivated by gratitude. Gratitude is the basic Christian attitude, a foundational characteristic of all spirituality. And I think especially for us. I'm sure you're familiar with the quote from Meister Eckhart, a Dominican mystic, when he said, if the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough. There's more and more being written today, books, articles, blogs, which tell about the research that's being done that's proving that grateful people are healthier physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. How important it is for us then, since it's embedded in who we are as Catholic Christians. Paul tells the Thessalonians, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Our very being, our deepest way of prayer is about gratitude. We talked a few minutes ago about the Eucharist. Each week we celebrate Eucharist. Eucharist, we know, is a Greek word that means thanksgiving. If I asked you right now, why do you worship? Why do you come to Eucharist each weekend or daily? There would probably be lots of reasons, and they'd all be true. And yet the main reason we gather is to give thanks. Despite whatever disappointments or discouragements or worries or losses that we have, at the same time, we've been given so much. And that all we can do in the face of such a gracious gift is to say thank you to our God. So to be a catechist rooted in spirituality is to be motivated by gratitude. Gratitude connects us to God, the generous giver of all good things. Gratitude empowers us to see each person with whom we walk this journey as a gift. Gratitude instills in us an attitude of respect and joy and wonder at all that happens, especially within our ministry as catechists. So I'd like to look at one other aspect of spirituality for us as catechists. Perhaps as catechists, we have a situational spirituality. Situational spirituality means it's talking about an integrated life. And I think all of us have it, whether we're catechists or not. So we find, what it says is that we find our spirituality within the real life situations that already make up our lives. We don't have to go looking for a spirituality. It's embedded in our life. So we live this kind of spirituality, situational spirituality. For instance, if we become aware, and this isn't just about being a catechist, just think about your everyday life. If you become aware of stress in your life, does that prompt you to take a moment of prayer in order to get through that stress, in order to calm down? Have you ever, when you're driving in the car, take that time for reflection, prayer on the day's activities? Have you ever run into an old friend and that brought forth the prayer of gratitude in your heart? Did you ever experience failing to respond to somebody who needed you, and that leads you to a longing for forgiveness? Have you ever felt anxious or worried? And so what bubbled forth in you was a petition for peace and strength. Have you ever been bored with TV and so turned it off and took time for spiritual reading? Have you ever, because of insightful conversations with friends, afterwards it flowed into prayerful journal writing for you? So all of those everyday life situations brought you to an awareness of and a deepened spirituality. It wasn't something you went out and looked for. It was already there. And so maybe as catechists, we're surrounded by the privilege of situational spirituality, not only in our everyday lives, but uniquely in our life and ministry as catechists. So have you ever experienced watching the enthusiasm of young children paint their feelings about God's love, and that unearths some feelings in you about being grateful for God? Have you ever been in a situation where answering the questions of youth, maybe about suffering and loss, worry, in the midst of that, it prompted a quick prayer within you for God's help and God's wisdom as you listened and responded? As you prepared for a session and studied the needs of today and Catholic social teaching, did that ever impel you to reach out in service and justice in your life? Or when you were planning for a session and you were planning for prayer with your learners, did that ever lead you to new ways of praying? So spirituality flows from and touches all parts of our life. So to be disciples, we need to be intentional about taking time to nurture our spirituality. But at the same time, our spirituality is nurtured and grows continually and constantly. And I think as catechists, we experience the privilege of growth because of and within our ministry as catechists in today's church. So one other thought, when we looked at the definition at the beginning that I use sometimes, I said that spirituality encompasses all we are, not just our prayer. However, prayer and spiritual practices, of course, are foundational to our spirituality. We can't develop and grow in all of these characteristics unless we're also rooted in prayer and spiritual practices. On my website, there's some handouts of ideas for different types of prayer and various spiritual practices. These are just a couple of them, but there's lots of them that give ideas too of ways to pray, not just ourselves, but ways to pray with our learners. And Mark mentioned my book. In that book, there's also some specific ways, ideas that catechists might pray, in addition to the ways we pray as disciples. So as you go forward, reflecting on spirituality, the spirituality especially that is growing within you because of your role as a catechist, these are some questions you might want to think about. And again, you'll have this PowerPoint so that you'll have them. You don't have to copy them down. But how is your spirituality deepened because you've been a catechist? What characteristics would describe your spirituality? I talked about some. That's certainly not all of them. How would you describe your spirituality within our Catholic tradition? And what would you say are your spirituality initials? Who or what has influenced you to be who you are today? So thank you. And I'll turn it back to.
Thank you very much, Sister.
Sure.
Mark here. I'll take it. David is going to facilitate the Q&A at this point. So David, I'll just turn it back over to you.
We're going to give the participants a few minutes to write in their questions. We have the surprising situation where there are very few right now. And I think I'll tell you why. Because, Sister, you have you've touched me deeply with what you've had to say. And I think that's what people are finding. It's saying so much more than programs and courses, anything could teach you about it. You've opened up spirituality for us and talked about how we're moving from our head to our heart. We're moving in our relationship with God closer with God, and the things that do that in an everyday way. You seem to be able to, in such beautifully simple language, just open the gates for us, and to show us that we must live and love as Jesus did. I think that comes across so clearly in what I personally love the spirituality initials that you talk about. I think that's a wonderful activity, and I think it would be a great way for a lot of us to move forward. So let's see what the participants are up to. They're offering questions at this point. Your examples of situationally promoting for prayer were a great reminder to awaken to the Spirit. Do you have any suggestions or other resources for prayers to use with justice as the focus?
I'm trying to think if there's some on my website. I'm not sure specifically on that. I can. There are some great organizations that give us a lot of ideas. Right now, I can't think of the one that I'm.
I think one of the best things is to direct them to your website, because it's very rich with other voices that encounter this, other options and avenues to explore in prayer and all kinds of things, and it's easily accessible, freely out there. I know that I use it many times.
There's one book too, David. If you want to hold on for 1 second,
yep.
I can get this one book.
While Sister Janet is looking that book up, I would suggest do go to her website. You'll find many examples of great resources that can be used.
This book, Just 1 Year, it's edited by Timothy Radcliffe. Timothy used to be the Master General for the Worldwide Dominican Order. But anyway, this book really goes through the year according to different seasons and things. But the majority of prayers in here, which he's compiled from all over the world, are very justice oriented. So that might be one place.
Great examples. And when we talk about spirituality being embedded in everyday life, it may mean that in everyday life we both affirm and are challenged with our spirituality. One participant wonders if you could speak about some of those challenges that we might face personally.
Well, I think when we see somebody that's hurting, or when we see somebody who's different than we are, that can be challenging, because our natural reaction might be, I don't have time right now to help somebody else, or this person is so different from me. We talked about Eucharistic spirituality. Sometimes I think it's easier for us to believe that Jesus could inhabit bread and wine, which is true, than to believe that Jesus inhabits that person who is so different from me, or who seems so weird. And so that's a challenge. That's a challenge. We come across people like that all the time. There was, I've seen it before, but it was circulating on Facebook again last week. Some author has done a beautiful set of pictures of Jesus washing feet. And they're everyday people. And they're people, some of the people that are pictured might be the last ones that I would want to wash their feet. That I can't accept them because I think they're so different than I am. So I think that's a challenge. I think it's embedded in everything that we do. when we see the needs of the world today. And we decide either we don't have time right now. And that's true. I think we need to be balanced. We can't take on everything and neglect our family and our ministry as catechists. But what does it compel me to do?
That leads beautifully to the next two questions, sister. One is, it involves a spirituality that helps us navigate conflict. And do you have suggestions, or what suggestion might you have to help us cultivate our spirituality that helps us navigate moments when those that we're accompanying may disagree with our approach or the teaching or feel hurt by the decisions?
I'm not sure this is the answer that you're looking for, but the first thing that came to my mind was, do we each have somebody that we can talk to? Either a spiritual director or a good friend who's a spiritual companion, who we can say what's going on and how I'm feeling, but they can affirm us if that's what's needed, but also challenge us to look at new ways to deal with conflict. I can get very embedded in thinking this is, I'm right. And the way I'm seeing this is the only way to see it. It's the only valid way to see it. And I can come up with all kinds of reasons, which are really not reasons, but are excuses. So we need somebody in our life who we can talk with about, this is the conflict that's going on right now, and this is what I believe. But be open to them saying to us, have you ever thought about this? Or have you ever done this?
That's very useful now. And this stems from that. This participant says, I find more and more people who have trouble with what they believe because of what they've experienced. Mm-hmm. They find the reality of their lives not well reflected in the church teaching. Where is their hope? How do we help them?
I think you've named a real reality. I think being present, in many ways, in many situations, we can be the compassionate face of the church where they've never experienced that before. And so with our presence with them, with our affirmation of them, with our compassionate understanding of what they've gone through, are going through, we can show them that the church isn't how maybe they've been hurt in the past, that there's more to the church than that. We're not going to take away, unfortunately, some of their detrimental experiences, but can we act differently and be willing to walk with them for as long as it takes in affirmation and support?
And all of this for the individual that's doing this ministry can be very not only time consuming, but draw on personal energy. And as catechists continue the work, there's a question about what happens when you're just too tired and you need to be refueled yourself. All of these things are good and so hard to do each day and every day. How does one cope when they're too tired to be this way on a day that is needed? So what are some of the things that you might suggest?
I think that's an excellent question, because the reality is we're never going to be good for anybody else unless we've first taken care of ourselves. We cannot give what we don't have. And so that means that we need to take quiet time. We need to take time away. We need to take time for prayer. We need to take time to be surrounded with people who support us, but also challenge us. And to realize that, yes, there are days we're just too tired. And that's okay. As long as those days don't become weeks, don't become months, don't become a way of life. But we can be our own worst enemy, and our own worst critic. And it's a balance. And a lot of us have been raised, that you have to be all for everyone. And that's not possible. And especially in today's world, when you look at the needs today, that are surrounding us, we can't do everything. And so to be honest about who we are and what our gifts are, and decide, what can I do? And then do that, but not get upset with ourselves. It's like, near the beginning of Lent, I saw a number of articles that said, okay, Lent is 2 weeks over and you haven't done anything yet. But don't give up. Don't say, okay, I've made a mess of this Lent. So no, start now, start today. So not to get upset with the times we are too tired or too exhausted or too hurt to do something. But care for ourselves, and then find something that you can do after you've built yourself up.
One of the powerful things that you said was, we don't go to God alone, that we go as community. And one of the great things about these sessions for me is watching it open the eyes of individuals in the different ministries that they're in. Now, this wasn't a question, but more of a comment. I've not got a question, but a comment. So much of what Sister Janet said is applicable to helping our RCIA sponsors to use when contemplating how to accompany the elect. So they're seeing ways of using the catechetical spirituality and the way of going about spirit to expand into other forms of ministry. And I think that's very powerful.
I think too, David, I think that we concentrate so much, both with children and youth and adults, on, and I'm not saying this is important, but we concentrate so much on sharing with them the beliefs and the tradition of our church, and that's crucial. But do we spend as much time helping people to look at their call to spirituality, their call to a deepened life with God and with others? I'm not sure we do that enough, our call to holiness, and I mean, I remember hearing a professor at a university say once that he asked his undergrads, how would you feel if somebody said to you, you are holy? And the majority of responses were, I'd be upset. Well, I'm not a stick in the mud. I like to go to parties. I mean, what he said was, we've given a whole inaccurate idea of what holiness is, if that's what they're thinking. And so how do we in our ministry as catechists help people, not just to know the beliefs and teachings of our faith, but how do we live them as we grow and develop in our relationship with God and with God's people?
Powerful words indeed. Here's a really challenging question for you. This participant wants to know, what do you see? What gives you hope in the church today? What gives you hope for the role of the catechist as we move forward?
What gives me hope in the church today is the ordinary people. It's the ordinary people who are there, who are living. What gives me hope for catechesis today, again, are the people who are responding to the call to be a catechist. And they're not doing it because they're getting glory or they're getting paid, but they in some way or other know that what they've experienced, that they've experienced God's care, and they want others to experience that too. My hope is very seldom in the institutional church, but it's in the ordinary people who are living their call to holiness and living their call to ministry, no matter what that is. And it could be in the parish, it could be in their working world, with their families. There are lots of people that are doing that. And there are lots of people who are searching and are open to seeing God in new ways. And we have I think that's very hopeful.
I think that's a very positive way to finish our time together as well. And I know that I think Anna's going to thank you, or Margaret's going to thank you. But sister, you have opened up a vista for us that takes the spirituality of the catechist in such a joy-filled way. I can't thank you enough for that. I'll turn it back over to Mark.
Thanks.
Or to Anne.
Sister Janet, I have the privilege of thanking you, and I'm going to make Meister Eckhart very happy. So I just want to say thank you. It's such a simple phrase that in this case conveys a wealth and a depth of meaning. We are deeply appreciative of your time with us today. We're grateful for your moving, insightful, challenging presentation, but also the quality of your presence with us today. It has really embodied, and you have really embodied, what you described as the spirituality of the catechist. You haven't just spoken about it, you've made it real for us today. And there truly, this is kind of a cliche, but it's not meant to be. There truly are no words to convey the kind of gratitude that we feel. Your presence has not only opened up and described the spirituality of the catechist, you've modeled it for us. You've lived it with us in this time together. Your compassion, your obvious faith, your depth of experience and reflection, your hope, and more than anything, your good common sense really shine through this. And for your generous gift of all of those qualities, we are deeply grateful. And on behalf of everybody who's out there today in this cyber community, thank you very much.
Thanks, Anne. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne and David, and certainly thank you, Sister. It's been wonderful. Your presentation today was very, very heartening for me, and I know for others. As I was reading through the questions, there were many comments about how affirmed people felt, how clear your presentation was, and how much it has helped them to understand that notion of the call to spirituality, that underlying, that which really propels us to do the work that we do in terms of teaching and leading people in faith. So thank you for that. For everyone, there you go, janetschaeffler.com. You can go to her website, and it truly is a wealth of information and resources. You can contact Sister Janet at janetschaeffler@adriandominicans.org should you wish to. As she mentioned, she will provide us with her PowerPoint and her, and we'll have this recording as well. And Brandon, if you just, we'll take a look at the publications that we have available. There's some publications on the CCCB website: Creating an Effective Mystagogy, Sunday Prayer for Catechists, Liturgical Catechesis in the 21st Century, A School of Discipleship. These are just some of the many resources that are available through the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops publications. So I encourage you to check that out. And of course, Sisters' publications, just some of them: Deepening Faith, the Spirituality of the Catechist, and Spiritual Essentials for Life's Second Act. I am really interested in this one. Let this be the time. So you can look at that list and sort out how to order those, and maybe Sister Janet has some advice for us on that, that you could access those books. Is it through the publishers, Sister Janet?
The Deepening Faith is from Liturgical Press,
Okay.
The other two are from 23rd publications,
Okay.
but I believe they're all available too. I know the ones from 23rd are available on Amazon.
Okay. All right. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Happy Easter. We'll see you next week.